All right, guys, how are you doing? Welcome to the Unafraid podcast, episode 13. The lucky 13.
We made it.
I got my good friend Kyle here. Some of you guys probably recognize him. He has a podcast called Undaunted, which we've discussed on there a couple times. But Kyle and I kind of go back, at least 10 years?
At least
It's been a long time. So Kyle is actually in the new book, Unafraid. I actually talk about him, and he is the gentleman. I think he was 25, 26 at the time.
Man,
I was
maybe even younger.
32. That kind of came up and put his hands on me and prayed, put his hands on me in certain way. No, I'm just kidding. Just prayed over me, and it was awesome. And we kind of formed a bond, and we stayed in contact this whole time. So Kyle, you do a lot of stuff, dude. You're in jiu-jitsu, you got a podcast, you speak your voice, you don't sugarcoat things, which I admire and I love that. So give us a little background about yourself, if you don't mind, man.
Yeah, so originally from Lawton, Oklahoma, basically lived in Oklahoma my entire life, except for a short stint in New York City. But, grew up in kind of a typical family. Dad worked at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. My mom worked at Fort Sill on base the entire time. So I was around military my entire life.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's just kind of how it goes. But you kind of get a sense of that transient community. But the cool thing that it did for me growing up is I grew up around all kinds of people. Because the military and Goodyear attracted so many different people. And so like when I look back at my school pictures or whatever, like my class pictures, for relatively small town in Oklahoma, quite a bit of diversity. Like there were more kids that didn't look like me than did look like me.
Right.
So it kind of led to an interesting, upbringing. And it was kind of a rough city. So we had, kind of a gang problem that got even worse after
I don't think you'd hear that in Oklahoma, right?
Gang. People don't understand, like
Oklahoma gang.
Yeah, like people think like they always think about South Central LA, they think about New York, they think about all those different things. But there were different factories. I was talking to a prosecutor up in Oklahoma City a few years ago that there was it was like a Ford or a GM factory that shut down somewhere, and they moved a plant to Oklahoma, and that brought like a Crip set to Oklahoma that had never been here before.
Wow.
Or maybe even been Hoover's. I can't remember which. But like growing up in Lawton, like the gangs were kind of funny, and then like later into high school, it's like they weren't funny anymore. They were doing some really, dirty kind of mean stuff. And so you kind of had to grow up with, my dad likes to call, keep your head on a swivel. Mm-hmm. You just had to do that. But you didn't think you were learning anything. Like you just thought, hey, this is life and this is how things are. And it's not until you get to college. I went to the University of Central Oklahoma on scholarship, and you what
was the scholarship for?
So there at the time, I don't know if they still do it, but it's a leadership scholarship.
Okay.
And so it's a full tuition, room and board, like kind of the whole nine. And it's given to 25 incoming freshmen a year. Mm-hmm. And there's like 1,200 applicants or something like that. And so I got that in 2004, and then my wife got it in 2005. That's how she and I met.
Oh, gotcha.
And so, getting to go to a city like Edmond in Oklahoma, it's very, very different than Lawton. And you start meeting people from all over the state, and they just don't really have the same upbringing as you. But yeah, that's kind of the long and short of the childhood part. But, I guess kind of how you and I connecting at that men's camp, we were, I was part of the leadership group of this, kind of this, men's ministry, if you want to call it that.
So that's what your position was at that time?
So at that time, I don't remember what I was doing for work, but I helped them start that organization.
Okay.
Because it was, whenever I became a Christian, I was a 10th grader, right? And so I'm learning what it means to become a man while I'm learning what it means to become a Christian. And I talked to you about this a lot, but I saw a dichotomy between the manly men and the godly men, right? So the manly men were outside the church doing man stuff, and the godly men were inside the church, wearing their clothes that are, perfectly crimped and, all that. And hey, I'll pray for you, brother, and in that kind of attitude. And so I got this dichotomy that grew into my teenage years and into my early adulthood, where it's like, okay, godly men and manly men can't be the same thing. Mm-hmm. But then I finally realized at some point, like that's clearly not the case, that they can be the same thing. But, I didn't see a lot of ministries out there kind of catering to that. Churches certainly weren't catering to that. Mm-hmm. So I was with a group that at the time I thought was going to really cater to that, but they really only focused on these camps, which are obviously can have a big impact in someone's life, as you attested to in Unafraid and everything else. But then after a while, kind of long story short, it's like, they wanted to move way too slow and be very, very undynamic in the things they wanted to do. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I felt like there's an entire segment of the population, that was going to potentially miss out on Jesus because his followers were too soft. The church was too soft. Yeah, exactly. The ministries that purported to be men's ministries were actually women's ministries repackaged for men.
Yep.
And so I was like, and so I'm like, I'm not down for that because I mean, you know the drill. You've read devotionals or stuff on, YouVersion or stuff like that to where it's for men, right? And so it's got like wood or it's got like a, military helmet or if it's got camo or something like that. And then you start reading the words and it's like, this could have been written by a woman. Like this is almost coming from a more feminine perspective. And so that's kind of what led to Undaunted.Life. And I know we're going to get into a lot of that, but that's a little bit of the background, kind of how I came to doing what I'm doing now. It's just, I saw way too many people that were going by the wayside.
Which I agree with you 100% is I think that's where we like connect big time. It's like, I think that warrior piece is missing tremendously. And we're going to dive into that. So you have a wife, right? You have one kid, right?
So we have two kiddos.
Two kids.
Like
one just came, right?
Yeah, one just came around in March of this year. And so right now we have a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. So basically everything.
How's the house life now?
Oh, it's terrible. It's awful. It's ratchet. The thing about
Which is why you need to be the warrior.
Right. So it's like, so you got 2 boys. So I got boys, because I don't know what the heck I would have done with the daughter. But like, you get your boys, but then you got your 2-year-old and you got start seeing that personality coming out. But then with the 5-month-old, there's not a whole lot I can do right now because, mama's feeding him and mama's taking care of him. And there are times when he just isn't going to be caressed by dad. He needs mama. But, he's such a happy kid. Like he smiles literally constantly and all the time. But
that's awesome.
When you have sons, Eddie, the thing about it, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, I've always been interested in rites of passage. Like when does a boy know they're a man? Like, cause I don't have a moment like you did, in, the sand pits, whenever you were in, basic training, for the Marine Corps. It's like you knew at that moment something had changed and shifted and became different.
Isn't that a little bit too late? Aren't I missing something?
How old were you?
That my 17?
I don't think that would be too late.
I mean, I feel like there should be something before that.
Well, there should be
possibly by my father, another adult male in my life.
Right. So there should be something that should have preempted that moment in the sand pits. Now, in your case, I don't know that the sand pit would have been as incendiary and as life-changing as it was if you had all this prompting beforehand, because I didn't have any of that.
Right.
Like, I don't know that moment.
It's like a gradual versus a bam.
Right, exactly.
Ambush.
Like, and we don't have rites of passage culturally anymore. Like, there are certain sects of certain religions that do that, where it's like, okay, you're a man now. And in certain tribal cultures, it's like, what is it? It's there's some tribe in
Spartans,
Africa.
for example, they got to go out, they got to kill the beast or whatever after their training. Like that would be the rite of passage.
Yeah, there's still currently tribes in Africa where they will send you into the wilderness with a spear and no other materials, and you need to kill a lion and bring it back. And, I think if I get the story straight, like they'll put the skull of the lion on your hut, and for the rest of your life, everyone in the tribe will know a man lives here. And if you come back alive without a lion, you're branded as a coward until the day that you die. And because it's like you either don't come back alive, or you come back alive with a lion, or you come back alive without a lion.
So that would be accountability.
Yeah, there's your built-in accountability. But like just getting back to the rites of passage thing, it's like most boys in our culture, Eddie, they self-identify as a man at some point. And we're all about identification. You can identify as whatever you want to now, but they will self-initiate into manhood. So they will decide, once I've done this, I'm a man now. So I've had sex for the first time. I got my first job. I graduated from college. I passed basic training, something like that. But no one's telling them when they become a man. But here's the other thing. So somewhat, not a super lengthy story, but I think it'll make the point. I heard about these 2 guys they were brothers. And so they both had sons that were around the same age. And so they had been teaching their sons about like, hey, this is how you survive on a mountain. Here's the things that you need to do to orient yourself and, to get food and shelter and all that. So long story short, they take these kids, they're probably 13 years old, and they climb to the top of this mountain. And then the dads say, all right, kids, hopefully you've been paying attention to the stuff we've been teaching you, because you're staying. We're going back down to base camp. We'll see you in the morning for breakfast, kind of a thing.
Right.
And so the kids kind of get wide-eyed and they're like, oh crap. Like I wasn't, thinking.
It's all of a sudden real.
Right, it's super real. So the dads go back down to base camp. Long story short, the kids make it back down to base camp the next day. But then the fathers do like a ceremony with their sons where, the uncle is talking to the nephew, and then also the father's talking to the son at different points. And they're calling out things in the kid that are awesome. Like, hey, you're very courageous. You're very dutiful. You're very sober-minded. That's natural. But then they also say, here's the things you're going to struggle with. You're not as assertive as you might want to be in certain situations. Sometimes you take too long to make decisions. whatever it is, like depending on the kid's personality.
A hot wash.
Right. So exactly. It's a hot wash, like at the end of your chapters, like but they're saying like, it's not just, hey, you're a man now. You did this physical cool thing and, we can post it on Instagram now. Now you're a man. No, it's way bigger than that. It's like, here are the great things about you that we're going to make you even sharper. But here are those super rough edges that you're going to have to really, really worry about as you get older. And at that moment, that kid knows not only who they are, but they know the responsibility that's now on them.
See, that's a good thing. And that's what's missing right now. We're like pumping each other up with a bunch of freaking fluff.
Yeah.
And that's great to like positive reinforcement, but people, you still need to point out, hey, we need to work on it. It's not someone tearing you down.
Right.
It's constructive criticism, and we all need it.
Right.
Like we all need it. After every football play, baseball, whatever it is, basketball, it doesn't matter. Sports, going into a business meeting or doing a certain deal. Like I could have done this. You can do it to yourself, but also having an accountability partner, someone that's going to hold you accountable, would be like, hey, we need to do this a little bit better. Obviously, having that tact to express that, but we need that. And I think that's missing a lot. You can just see it on media, like, oh, I'm this, everything's perfect. Actually, that's not it.
Well, we make it too subtle. And okay, so like going back to some examples, even from your book, when you were becoming an expert breacher, you were already a breacher, but you're becoming an expert breacher. Like, would you have ever gotten to the point where you would have been basically inventing new breaching techniques if the guys in training hadn't been pushing you, like hadn't been telling you, hey, this really sucks. This is not up to par. Like you need to get this up to, and that doesn't mean they're yelling at you. That doesn't mean
100%.
they're telling you to get cold, wet, and sandy. That it doesn't mean that, but it might as well. But like we treat kids literally with kid gloves, but then we expect them to develop into these fully formed adults. It's like, at what point you've literally cleared the path in front of them their entire lives. You know what I mean? Like you made life so easy, but then you expect them to be like resilient and tough. It's like, dude, that's not how that works.
That's so true. I catch myself sometimes with the kids, like, no, you do it. You figure this out and like try to like have that good conversation of like, hey, you need to figure this out.
And they're going to do it poorly.
But they get better and better and better. And that's how we learn. Like that's everything. I always, when I do like speaking engagements or anything, is like, you always hear that when I get to the top.
Right.
When I get to the top, the view's amazing. Okay, if you think that you're ever at the top, you're wrong. Right. Like you might have accomplished that mountain, like the SEAL mountain. I might have accomplished that. Or starting a podcast mountain. There's another mountain.
Right.
And then there's another mountain. There's a long mountain range of mountains that you need to go accomplish or should go accomplish or have that drive to better yourself, your family, the people around you. There is no when I get to the top. There's not. And you need what you just said. You need that positive. You need that constructive criticism to make changes, switch things around, take a little different path, maybe like tweak things and get better.
Well, and you also need discipline. Everybody in our culture, Eddie,
that's the groundwork.
They're all about motivation.
Yep.
And I did a little speech for a group a while ago, but it's like, okay, so you keep talking about these false summits, and that's exactly true. So you get to the summit, you think you've made it, and then it's like, oh no, it's a false summit. If anybody's ever climbed a 14 or climbed a mountain,
more.
It's the freaking worst. It's the worst feeling.
How many more switchbacks?
Like, you're gassed out. Like you have all this, up and down of elevation and altitude and everything. But the big thing is everybody in this culture is waiting for that next bit of motivation. So they're doing the daily motivation, alpha motivation on Instagram. And, you post, things that are motivating and I post things that are motivating. That's fine. But if that's what you're depending on to get you to that next thing, like that's only going to take you so far. You are always on the lookout for more motivation when motivation is all you put in your gas tank. But discipline, right? Discipline overcomes everything. So I did this little speech, Eddie. I thought this was funny and I knew it was coming, but I was just surprised when it actually did come. The guy asked me, they're like, because I did this whole speech about, discipline's better than motivation. You should always shoot for discipline, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, Kyle, that's easy for you to say because you're a really disciplined guy. And I'm like, okay, so you're assuming a lot about me. You're assuming that I was just born this way, that I didn't develop that skill set. And let's just say you're right, even though you're not. Let's just say you're right. Let's say you and I talked to this guy individually. I'll say, let's say you and I both have a goal of doing a set of 30 dead hang pull-ups, okay? Like there are certainly people that can do that, but even when you're in shape, that's a pretty lofty goal.
That's a good number.
20's hard, 30's a different level, right? So I even remember reading when Adam Brown was going through his training, like wanting to go through the different things, like he would just do pull-ups on a tree and he got up to doing like 27 or 28, that type of a thing. I told that guy, I was like, look, let's say you only fuel with motivation and I only fuel with discipline. If you and I are the same type of animal, we're the same age, same athletic ability, same in shapeness or whatever, we have to take the exact same path to get to that goal, to be able to accomplish that goal. Right. but you're going to be constantly looking around for that next motivational speech, that next picture on Instagram, that next self-help book to get you to that next training program. When all I have to do, Eddie, is worry about throwing my legs out onto the floor, out of bed in the morning, because what's required of me is the discipline that my home gym brings.
Implementation.
Right. It's like, dude, like, I don't want to ever, Eddie, for the rest of my life, I don't ever want to put weight on my back and squat with it. I don't ever want to put weight on the floor and pick it up and put it back down. I don't ever want to dead hang from a pull-up bar and then pull my chin above it, ever. I don't want to. But want to doesn't matter, because want to has to do with motivation. It's you are either a person that is strong, and in order to be strong, you squat, you deadlift, you do pull-ups, you do whatever, or you're not that person, right? That's where discipline comes in. And we don't teach our kids that. We don't focus on that. And that becomes a major problem, because you have these kids that you've taken all the obstacles away from them their entire life. You've helped them do everything. And now when they're out on their own, they don't have the discipline to hold down a job, to do that next step, to start that business, to do whatever the thing is. And it's like, part of that's on you, mom and dad. Like you got to roll in that.
Yeah. We want to point fingers at this generation. Okay. Look at the generation of parents that have pretty much put that. It's funny you just talk about that. Tristan, my son, he just started football.
Okay.
This is like his first week of school, just got back in. This is his first week of getting up at 5:30. Has to be at school early before it starts. And yesterday he's like, "Can I just miss this one day?" I was like, buddy, we don't do that. I'm like, breakfast is ready for you. I made breakfast for you. It's all just, get ready to go. Today he did the same thing. I was like, man, this is what discipline looks like, is you getting out of bed, even though you really don't want to do it. You go do it, and once it's over, the reward is so good. It's like developing that habit, and you have to have discipline to do that habit. Because there's another side of that habit of, I won't go today, or I'm not going to do this today. And so many people are in that category.
Right.
Plain and simple, in one way, shape, or form. And I'm probably in that. To be honest with you, I had a cinnamon roll at breakfast this morning, and I should have done that.
But you have to make discipline deposits. And that's required, deposit
that's a great way to put it.
And again. So you're not much of a runner, right? So you talk about that. So I'm more of a sprinter, but I will run as well. Part of me is I just want to kind of be like a hybrid athlete, to where it's hey, if I need to be able to deadlift a lot, I'll be able to. I'm not going to deadlift more than someone who only deadlifts, but I'm going to be able to deadlift a lot. I'm not going to be able to run farther and faster than someone that just runs.
Speaking of deadlifts, what did you just get? You remember you sent a picture, I put every weight that I had in the gym.
Oh, dude, it was falling off the edges, but it was 450, and so legit. It's
I was like, buddy, I see you.
It was one of those things, because it's I'm not much of a, hey, we're going to 1 rep max. That's the only time I've ever 1 rep max in deadlift. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go back down to doing, 3 sets of 335 or whatever, to keep everything safe. But in those moments where you're tempted to not do the thing you need to do, that's when you need to do it twice. I remember Adam Wainwright, he was a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. He had Tommy John surgery. And in the off season,
Don't hold the Cardinal piece against.
Oh no, that should make you like me even more, right? What do you got? Cubs fans?
I forgot about the Cardinals.
Bunch of what are you, a Reds fan?
You know what I am.
Losers. But the thing about it is in the off season, he said, hey, on the days I didn't want to work out, I made sure I worked out twice. And so going back to the running thing,
that's good.
Isn't that good?
That's good.
To where it's just you're telling.
Real quick, did you hear that? The days that I did not want to work out, I worked out twice.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you're doubling up on telling your inner, hey, you shut up and get in the corner. Today's not about
inner voice, self-talk.
Right. And so and also I think shame is a great motivator. Some people think that's really rude. My self-talk is very shameful. It's hey, do you want to be fat again? Because I was fat when I was a kid. Do you want to be fat again? Hey, do you want to be the slowest guy at the gym? Hey, do you want to be the guy that cardio taps? It's that type of thing. But when you're running and no one's watching and no one's running with you, and you don't have a heart rate monitor on that you're uploading to a website where, all your followers can see what you did that day and all that. When it's just you don't have to keep running. And you certainly don't have to run hard. And if you haven't made those deposits in that bank, you're going to be tempted to do that. But guess what? You do that once, and then you do it again, and then you're going to do it in your marriage.
New habit.
Then you're going to do it in your spiritual life. Yes, you are developing new pathways in your brain that lead you to constantly take the easy way out. Because people always, they always think they can categorize their life I'm just taking the easy way in my workout. I'm not going to take the easy way out in my business. It's well, based on what?
It'll flow over.
Yeah, it's
that's just who we are as humans. We take the path of least resistance.
Right.
Plain and simple.
And you have to practice, especially in a world where we don't have to go out and get our meat. That's a luxury when people can go out and do that. We go to the store and it's wrapped in cellophane and we just bring it home. Life is so insulated. It's so easy. in our day and age, we have to seek out discomfort, right? You know, Michael Easter wrote The Comfort Crisis, doing things that are so far outside of your comfort zone that you're literally forcing your brain to do things that we have evolved beyond,
right?
Which is having to kill our food, having to decide, I can see an animal on that other ridge, but do I have enough calories to get there and take that animal down? Because that's potentially going to end my life if
that's
I don't
a brutal
make it
conversation
happen.
to have with
Dude,
yourself.
it's rough.
I'm like, dude, can I get my keys, go to my truck, drive a mile to the store, get whatever I want?
And you're like, nah, I think I'll just have someone deliver it to
exactly.
me. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
God, I'm sometimes pathetic.
yeah, no, like, but we do have to get to that point where
we do.
have to
We're getting further away from that point because we are entitled.
Yep.
We have so much we just do. It's so true. It's funny you said about the pain piece. There's a lot of people take that pain, like the pain of jiu-jitsu, striking, going to the weight room, doing a run, saying no to that cinnamon roll that I should have done, but it was a new one. I had to try it.
Was it good though?
Dude, I split it with
just
my
admit
buddy.
it to everybody you're talking to.
It was
right
so
now.
good.
It had to have been really good.
It was a first watch. It was so good. But people look at that pain like this is bad. Pain is not fun.
No.
But if you change that mindset, and you know, we're both big mindset guys, is like, after I go through this, what the product that comes out on the other side versus the one that quits and doesn't do it, two different entities over here.
Yeah.
This one is where the shame comes in. And then it filters out to other things is like, I'm gonna back off on my work, on my relationship, on time with my kids.
Yeah.
Where this one's like, dude, I just rose up when I really didn't want to. Okay, what else can I? And you start snowballing and you get those little goals and they build and they build and they build. And then you get these bigger and bigger things. And people are missing out on that. A lot of people are missing out on that. They take the easy road and they can't, they shouldn't.
Well, and they don't understand how constantly taking the road less traveled, you know, Robert Frost, constantly taking that road that most people are unwilling to take, they discount what daily impact that's going to have on them. Like, I forget the quote where someone's like, it's like, we always overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a decade.
Right.
Or maybe I got to.
We never live up to our potential.
Yeah, right. Like we literally never do. But the thing about it is, for most people, like, they're not going to set goals. And the reason they're not even going to set goals is because they don't want to fail. They don't want to not hit their goals, right? And so, even with our children, kind of going back to that, we set such low expectations for our children that whenever they don't meet those expectations, we think it's okay. But it's like, imagine if you had set the expectations up here a little bit and they didn't hit them. They're going to still end up so much better.
Exactly.
Than
What
they
is
were.
it? Shoot for the moon. If you miss, you'll be with the stars.
Yeah, you'll be hanging out with the stars or whatever, which isn't exactly true because our nearest star is like super far away, but it doesn't matter. It's cute. It's cute on a bumper
take away
sticker.
that one.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But like, at the end of the day, most people need to understand that there are a lot of things that they're missing out on by just not being disciplined, because especially with exercise, because that's the easiest one. Because I constantly talk about cultivating spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Well, I can't look at you and tell if you're spiritually resilient, but I can look at you and pretty much be able to guess whether or not you're physically resilient. But a flabby, sloppy body is indicative of a sloppy life. And now you do have those people that are flabby, that are crushing it in the business world. Maybe they're super spiritual warriors and those types of things. But if God called them to something that required physicality, they wouldn't be able to help out. Right? What if God has for you in your pathway in life is to be able to protect someone who's being violated? Maybe they're being raped or they're being physically assaulted.
Exactly.
And you're physically, and from a training perspective, unprepared to like intercede in that situation. What do you think you're going to do? I love big guys. Big guys are my favorite. They're 6'2", 240. They're like, I'm big. I don't need to know how to fight.
That way.
It's like, bro, like I had tried to explain to a buddy of mine. He's like, who would win in a fight, The Rock or Nate Diaz? I'm like, Nate Diaz 100 times out of 100.
One thing, Nate Diaz can get hit by a train and still get up and rock on.
And he's like, but The Rock's so big. I'm like, but The Rock also doesn't know how to fight. He's huge. Yeah. Now, if he fought a 120-pound guy that also didn't know how to fight, yeah, it's going to be an issue for that person. Yep. He's going to get, stomped into the ground. But again, it's like you're going to fall to the level of your training in all aspects of life. Physical training, fight training.
And actually lower than that, because once you get the fight or flight going on, all the drops,
you're not making good decisions anymore.
Things are getting cloudy. You're looking through a toilet paper roll. You're like, what do I do? You're not going to even be to where you should train. That's why you train to not drop super low.
Right.
You get about maybe 50 to 75% of actually what you can do. Like shooting. Sure. Perfect example. People always go to the range and just shoot, right? But they won't do it like, okay, do about 100 kettlebell swings. Now pick up your gun and shoot.
Right.
Now you're getting the heebie-jeebies of what's going on and like the sweaty palms and all that craziness of what's actually going to happen in a real life situation.
Think about the people that try to like, what is it, buck fever, to where it's like, you take a bunch of shots while you're sighting in your rifle, and then all of a sudden you see a life-changing buck, right? In your crosshairs, and it's, and you're super jittery, and it's like, everything comes with training. Like, that's how you're able to calm yourself.
Absolutely.
Like, dude, think about jiu-jitsu tournaments. I don't know how many tournaments that you've done.
Just a couple, yeah.
But rolling, you may be rolling with somebody that is worse than the guys that you train with normally, but for whatever reason, your grips are way more blown
goes out in 10 seconds.
Right? And like, you're so much more tired and you're making bad decisions. I remember the last match I did, it was absolute final. I'm going against the guy. It's about 220. I weighed in at 187. And I ended up beating the guy 19-0. But I was so gassed afterwards. Like, they handed me my trophy, and I was literally having trouble holding it. I'm like, I don't know if I can hold this long enough to take a picture. But that just it didn't really show my lack of preparedness, because I was prepared as I could have been cardiovascularly, did a lot of rolling. Like, I was ready to go. But that adrenaline dump, like the realization that, hey, I just won my bracket, and then I went and won the absolute. Like, dude, this is awesome. Like, I didn't embarrass my school. I helped us win, the all around championship. I didn't embarrass my family. I didn't get, smashed into the ground, in front of everybody. And you just have that release, and your body just isn't used to that, because even if you do comp class, even if you roll hard 3, 4, 5 times a week,
doesn't matter.
You're never going to get that. But let's say I trained really, really lightly leading up to that tournament, right? I don't know if I would have still won, but it's just like, I wouldn't have been ready for that moment in that match when I was so gassed and so tired, but there's still 2 minutes left on the clock. Because at that point, if I was up 13-0, 14-0, I'm a sweep and a choke away from losing. Oh, right?
100%.
No one cares what the score was.
And that is the slowest clock in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm pretty sure it's not right.
Yeah, you look up at it, and
second's
like
20 seconds.
It's like, oh, this was a 6-minute match. How is there 7 minutes left? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But yeah, dude, like, it's just being able to be prepared, but it's putting yourself in those moments where you wanted to cardio tap, you wanted to stop running, you wanted to stop reading that book that was a little bit beyond you intellectually, you wanted to stop going to that group that spent a lot of time praying or whatever, because you're like, oh, this is just easier.
And we make that excuse. There you go. I was just about, because it's easier, but there is going to be a time in your life or your loved one's lives where you need to rise up. And if you don't have that training, whatever it may be, it might even be answering a question, a very important one.
Right.
And you're not ready, then you're not ready. You failed.
Eddie, how many times were you literally downrange so I'm going to use a really stupid example, and then we're going to go to a really awesome example. The stupid example is like my second white belt tournament. I hit a guy with a submission that I had never even drilled before. I had never done it. But I had taken the guy's back. I got cross collar, and then his arm was kind of flailing out here, and my brain just goes, well, you could just control that arm if you throw your leg over the top of it. So I do that, and then I grab his pants and freaking deadlift, and I bow and arrow choke him basically to death, right? I had never drilled that move from that position, not once, ever. And it wasn't until after the tournament, after, I had won, got my medal and all that, I'm like, oh, that just happened. Like, I know enough about jiu-jitsu to where that just made sense to do that, that my brain and my body worked in concert with one another for me to be able to get into that position. So there's your micro example. You did things downrange that you didn't really have to think about. Like, your body and brain were moving faster than you could even fathom. And, it probably saved your life, certainly saved the lives of the people around you. Based off of training. 100%. You would not have been able to do that if you had not put in the reps put in the time. And guys, like, maybe you're not super physical. Guys, listen to this. Maybe you're a lot older, and, a brisk walk is a tough workout for you. For you, you're in a sage part of your life to where you need to be imparting wisdom into younger men. But let's say you're unwilling to read books anymore because, that's kind of past me. I'm not in college anymore. Or you're unwilling to read books that challenge your point of view and your paradigms in your life. It's the same thing. Those are reps. Each page of that book that is challenging you is another rep, another rep, another rep. And
if you want to read, listen to a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Informative one. There's always a way to do it.
Yeah, you're either ready for it or you're not. There's no in between.
Right. No, I agree with you. I agree. Yeah, that was awesome. That was good.
I hope so. Are you going to pay me for that? Because I feel like I should be. I'll send you an invoice after we're done for all the cool things that I've said.
I guess. Yeah,
just put it down. We'll just keep a tally going.
All right. So, okay, that was good. But I want to here's what I really wanted to talk to you about big time Okay, first I gotta ask you this question.
Okay.
In Kyle's opinion, what is a man? What is a man?
Yeah.
Not a Christian man, just a man. What is a man?
So in the most basic terms, it's an adult human male, right?
Okay.
So that's what it is. You have XY chromosomes, like that's the basic thing. So like when someone's like, what is a woman? It's an adult human female.
Gotcha.
XX chromosomes, the whole nine.
Take me deeper as like how the actions,
Yeah.
take me a little on that word.
So a man is a male that cultivates spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis.
I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, that's what a man is.
Yep.
So again, at Undaunted.Life, we say if you're crushing it spiritually, mentally, and physically, that's going to bleed over into other parts of your life. Emotionally, relationally, in your business life, financially, everything is going to be better if you are spiritually, mentally, and physically crushing it. So what a man is somebody that is striving to develop that in a deeper sense on a daily basis. They don't take times off.
Okay, striving to develop.
Yeah.
Which means they're not there.
Oh,
Which means we try to work for it. We try to better ourselves, which
Right.
means no one has arrived. Is that what you're
never a finished picture.
Okay, thank you.
And so which might go counter to the question you asked, which is like, well, then you're saying that's what a man is, but then you're saying a man can't do that. It's like, okay, I hate using this word because it's what dumb people use to sound smart. It is nuanced. Like there is some nuance to that. But the thing about it is like, you will never arrive. So talk to an older sage guy that did all the physical things, maybe went to war, maybe saw some things that he never told anybody about. That
Explain the sage to the
yeah.
audience.
So a
if you don't
sage
mind.
is somebody that has a tremendous amount of wisdom that is beyond their warrior years.
And that's derived from knighthood, correct?
So even it goes back to the Greek times where you had the sages that would basically impart wisdom, because these are not the people that you're going to put in a phalanx, with a helmet and a breastplate and a sword necessarily. But these were going to be the people that would be imparting wisdom on the young men that would be doing those things. And so that's
Based off of failures, triumphs, and a lot of experience.
Lots of experience, lots of scars, and scars that everybody can see, and a bunch that they can't see as well. But that
Probably
person,
more so than the ones you can see.
absolutely. But if you're at that point in life, it's incumbent upon you to pass down that wisdom. And for these individuals, they're beyond some of the physical, right? But they're at a different place mentally. Think about it in terms of fighting. So people have talked about, and this is one of the reasons why, fighters using TRT or anabolics is so nefarious, is because if you're 42 years old and you're a fighter and you've been fighting for 20 years, mentally, you have more understanding of the fight game than a 22-year-old, but they're in much better physical condition than you. Everything about that animal is different than what you are because you're further along. But if you can take a steroid and become that physical beast with that mind, now you're dangerous, right? Now you're dangerous to the point of it needing to be illegal. But that's the thing, that these people, you're never going to be a fully formed man, because if you think you've arrived, you've missed the point. Because that sage that has seen battles, that has fervently loved his woman his entire life, that has imparted wisdom into his children and has caused them and helped them to develop, into being sharp and resilient human beings, that constantly takes you to be developing on a consistent basis. I tell people all the time, Eddie, I'm like, go for it.
If you heard what Kyle just said is, giving to the woman that you love, to your spouse, your significant other, and to your children. He didn't say making sure you're hitting the weight room. He threw those two first right there. So I want to make sure we're definitely honing in on that, because that is extremely, extremely important. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, but you should always look back on who you were 5 years ago, no matter where you're at in life. If you're 20 or if you're 80, you should always look back on who you were 5 years ago and be a little bit embarrassed. I used to think that.
Yep.
I used to think that book was not going to be worth my time. I used to think that this was how you would get to that next level of fitness. I used to think that not tapping in triangles made me tough. like that kind of thing.
Yep.
And because when I look back, I just turned 36. I look back on some of the stuff I thought when I was 31. I was like, oh, you idiot. Oh, you actually thought that. Because I had just started training jiu-jitsu.
You actually had it on your podcast.
Yeah, I had just started training jiu-jitsu back then. I thought I was a tough guy.
Yeah, you weren't.
I thought I could fight.
Yeah.
I thought if push came to shove, I would be the one shoving. And it was it became readily apparent super easily, super quickly that was not the case, and I was just not ready. But we have so many sheep, Eddie, walking around culture thinking they've got it, right? I'm a man. Why? Because I'm 28 and I've got a car and look at this job and look at my hot girlfriend.
Nothing to do with anything.
It's like, bro, dude, it's kind of like my pastor buddy, Joby Martin out of Florida. He talked about kind of the stuff that culturally makes you a man. So 4-wheel drive truck, wearing boots, beards, eating beef jerky. And dude, all those things are awesome.
That's what media says.
Right. But he says, dude, those things make me awesome. They don't make me a man. And he's so unbelievably right. Because you could have all those things. You can check all those 4-wheel drive, mud tires. You can check all those boxes. But if you aren't developing yourself spiritually, mentally, and physically, how good are you to society as a whole, much less your spouse and your children?
And how do you become the sage, right?
Right.
How do you do if you're not developing, if you're not training yourself?
Dude, no one's going to lean on your wisdom someday.
Besides somebody that's, you shouldn't be hanging around with probably.
Yeah, exactly.
That's about it. Yeah, that's good, dude. So, and that's a big question. That is a big question right now, especially with, you can just scroll on any media platform and be like, okay, this is not who we are designed to be.
Right.
All right. So we're going to take what that said, and this is the really good part. And before I even go on this part, we don't sugarcoat stuff here. You might not agree with the things we're saying, and that's totally cool. But I think the question I'm about to ask, we're both on the same page in this, and this is honestly truth of what I see. So the question is, are we seeing men in today's church, in Christianity? Are we seeing today's men? And I'm going to kind of just do a little lead off on this. You've been in the faith world longer than I have.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter about age. But one thing I realized, and this is why I fell in love with John Eldridge at Wild at Heart, is the way he kind of put
That's why it's right here.
Put two and two together. Is that I always thought that Christians were that like meek and mild, like we love everyone, hugging stuff, like everything's fine, please don't hit me, that kind of thing. We always hear turn the other cheek, like, okay, yeah. And I thought that's what it was. And I'm like, okay, that's not me. That was not what was embedded in my heart, because I'm like, dude, if there's evil, I'm going to take it to you.
Yeah.
And then learning more about this stuff, it's like there's a warrior side in us that needs to rise up in certain occasions. There's nothing wrong with the compassion.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with the empathizing. There's nothing wrong with the love. You need that. But what I believe in today's church is missing is that warrior piece. And I'm not going to so much blame it on the man, minus if they're not trying to better themselves like you've so eloquently spoke on, is that the church, I don't think, is talking about those things like spiritual warfare as much as we should be. It's all about the, what is love? Oh, we don't, keep score. We love everyone, like all that stuff. So that's my little rant real quick. That's kind of my take. I think you already know that. We've talked about this quite a few times on podcasts and other stuff. So it's on you, buddy. Yeah,
the church has been made for women and children. That's what the modern church is made for. And then the modern church and pastors and people that are on executive committees or elder boards for these churches are absolutely flummoxed. They're completely shocked that the men aren't engaged, the men aren't showing up, that women and children are showing up without their spouses and without, daddy there.
Isn't that like a red flag? Like,
yeah.
why?
It's like you would think that there might be a problem. Now, the easy thing is to say, well, that's the men's fault. You're right and you're wrong. Because what men do, Eddie, is if men don't feel like they can win the game, they typically don't even play. Right. So they're not even going to take their ball and go home. They're not even going to look for the ball. They're just going to leave. Yeah. Right. And so these churches are basically sending these signals to these men. This is not for you. This is not for you. We don't have you in mind when we're preparing our sermon series. We don't have you in mind when we're picking the key that we're singing the songs in. We don't have you in mind when we're looking at the lyrical content and trying to determine if it's homoerotic or not. And if you feel like you're singing to Jesus as if he's your Danish boyfriend, like we don't have any of this in mind. And when that's the blinking neon sign when men see when they walk in the church, they're going to go do other stuff. They're going to go to the shooting range or the driving range or get ready for the next fantasy football draft or look at porn and jerk off. Like they're going to go do other things. They're going to do the man things that they feel like they can control. They're going to go to the domains where they feel strong and competent, right? But recently, Jordan Peterson, who I'm an enormous fan of, he did a message to the Christian church YouTube video, went over 1 million views in a week and all that. And he was basically saying that evangelical Christian churches, and he was completely right, that they have to require more of the men in their churches, and they need to demand more of the men. Because what we do in the church is we make everything really, really easy. We have these squishy sermons that are essentially TED Talks with a few Bible verses sprinkled on top. You have a life coach that's calling himself pastor that thinks of a 4-week life lesson series that he wants to do. And then he's trying to figure out, okay, what Bible story can I put on top of this so I can still keep our tax exempt status? And so the men don't have to really try to understand what they're going through or what the pastor's saying. They don't have to dig in throughout the week into the scripture to, one, make sure the pastor's actually not giving them a line of crap, but also that they can exegetically deeper understand what's going on. And they've made it so easy. Come in, get your coffee, get your cookie, sit down, watch The Rock Show, listen to your TED Talk, and then get out. You get your spiritual Skittles, which wear off before you even leave the parking lot. And then you're shocked when these men have nothing for the church in terms of being able to push back darkness, much less storm the gates of hell. And so that's the thing that I think the church has done so unbelievably wrong, is we've made this seeker-sensitive model, which has basically ignored the men while at the same time pretending to cater to them.
That, my friend, was awesome. That was good.
Let's go.
And that's 100% right. Again, it is, you literally just said it, is by the time and I'm thinking about my past services, right?
Yeah.
By the time you're out of the thing, I totally forgot. I'm already ready to freaking start strangling necks.
Right. When it has nothing to do with your life. And I think the church, Eddie, they're scared of a guy like you. And I don't mean physically.
No, I know.
Like, they don't think that you're just going to lose your mind one day and go kill a bunch of people and then blame it on
they
PTSD.
Might sometimes.
But we don't have to talk about that. We certainly don't need to talk about it on air where people can look at it later. But like, they're scared of what a virile, testosterone-filled, manly man can do. But what they don't understand is a weak man creates way more destruction in their wake than a strong man does, especially a strong man that understands what meekness actually is. So you brought up meekness, so I need to explain this. In our modern parlance, in our modern lexicon, meekness is synonymous with weakness, right? Oh, that guy's really, really meek. Jesus, meek and mild. And we automatically get this image of the soft-featured white guy, not a Middle Eastern Jewish carpenter, carrying a lamb on his back, giving people smooches on the tips of their noses and telling them how cute they look in their tunics.
Like, all brought to you by the church.
Right, yeah, brought to you by this and brought to you by Pfizer, probably. Yeah. And so, like, but like, that's what we do. And what we don't give anybody a signal to or an understanding of is, okay, that's the Lamb of God. That is 100% who Jesus is. But do you know who he is 100% of the time as well? The Lion of Judah.
Oh, God,
That's why the Lion of Judah is on your hat right now. That's why that's our logo.
And what is this? What is this logo?
Yeah, that's the lion.
Undaunted.Life right there.
Yeah, Undaunted.Life. Keep seeking the Lion of Judah. That's how I sign off my emails. That's how I sign off my podcast. Because if you only understand the grace part of Jesus, the
Which
Lamb
is
part of Jesus.
important.
Right.
No doubt. No doubt.
You have to have that. But what people don't understand, Eddie, is he's 100% grace and 100% truth. He's 100% lamb, 100% lion. He's not 45% lamb, 55% lion, and depending upon where you're at in your station in life and how much testosterone you have flowing through your system, those numbers are a little bit, no. It's 100 and 100. But whenever I go and speak to a group of men, Eddie, I ask them, hey, in the last year, if your pastor has mentioned the Lamb of God, raise your hand. 100% of the hands go up 100% of the time.
With the Lion of Judah.
Right. Then I ask about Lion of Judah. 3 or 4, right? A smattering. But back to the meekness point, just to kind of put a bow on that. What meekness is, in the biblical definition, when these scriptures are written down in the original Greek or spoken in the Aramaic or when it was translated into Hebrew, whatever, right? In those moments, meekness was seen as a tremendous amount of power that was under voluntary control. So if you talk about a war horse, when you meek a war horse, you don't take away all their strength. You make them trained in a way and prepared in a way to where they can be under the complete control of their master, of their rider. Now, meekness in a Christian.
Like a military working dog would be the kind of the same thing.
Right. So shout out to Mike Ritland. We love you, man. But
we love you, buddy.
If you take all of the piss and vinegar out of that meat missile that you're trying to train, that is not going to be a useful dog downrange. Right. You're not going to be able to sell that to development group. You're not going to be able to sell that to, a sheriff's department that has 14 people that live in their town. That dog is going to be useless if it doesn't have its strength. But that strength needs to be under the control of its master. And that's what Christians need to focus on, is what meekness means in a Christian context is that you've got a tremendous amount of physical, spiritual, and mental strength under the control and the behest of the Father. And you have that ready to go when the Father says, I need that to be unleashed. Because what that may look like As CRT is about to be part of your children's school, and they're going to be bringing that Marxist anti-God ideology into your school district. And guess what? If you're unprepared to push back against that darkness,
you're going to get walked all over.
You won't do it. Physically, if you see a woman that is being violated, if you see a child that's about to be abducted, this happened a few miles away from my house. An 11-year-old was fishing with his dad at a pond in the most affluent city in the entire state of Oklahoma, and a guy in a van tried to abduct this guy's son because he was on the other side of the pond from him, an 11-year-old son. Luckily, the kid ran away. But let's say you are physically close enough to where you could intercede in that moment.
This kind of goes back to the crushing in the business world, but physically flabby.
Right. You have to have it all.
You're not going to be able to jump in on that one.
You need to focus on all that, because if you can't stop someone from destroying the imago Dei, the image of God that is written on one of his image bearers, then what good are you, right? Because in that moment, someone breaks in the middle of the night and is trying to harm your children or your wife. If you are unable to stop that, man, what are you going to do? Start a Bible study? Yes, and then I'm hitting the Christians on that. What are you going to open it up to John and say, sir, I understand what you're doing right now. I don't like it, but I don't think I can do anything because I've bought into this pussy pacifist version of Christianity, which won't allow me to intercede. I guess I'm just going to keep reading the Bible and praying over you until you finish.
Right now.
It's like, get out of here with that. Yeah. Get out of here.
And that doesn't mean like we go charge in with our war horses and tomahawks and start taking off heads. That's not what it's saying. Is that the focus is on the meekness, is on the mild side for sure. Because pretty much everything you said, if this happens, no one's talk about that.
Nope.
No one. Unless you're listening to certain podcasts or has that friend like, hey, dude, let's talk about some spiritual warfare because this stuff's real. Right. Because with all the goodness, there's a lot of evil out there, and you guys can see it. Start scrolling, you'll see it all. But yeah, no, that's like, I really wanted to dig in. That's like, yeah.
Eddie, one other thing as well. The church is so scared of that, but they don't understand what happens when you teach a man to be dangerous but have that under control. Because John Eldridge talked about this one of the last times he came on my show. We don't get rid of things that are dangerous. We put them in the hands of people that know how to use them, okay? Medicine is dangerous. That's why we put them in the hands of trained pharmacists, right? Doctors can be dangerous, or like medicine and all these different things can be dangerous. So we don't just get rid of those things. Like we put them in the hands of people that know how to use them. Guns can be very, very dangerous in the hands of somebody that is not going to use them for good. But you know this, and I know this.
Screwdriver as well.
Right. You know this, and I know this, you being around SEALs and fighters and me being around fighters. The baddest dudes that I know, the most dangerous human beings that I know, if you didn't train with them, you would have no idea. Because they're not walking around with neck tattoos and trying to knuckle up against guys in the bar and trying to prove their manhood every moment of every day. They're quiet. They're unassuming.
Extremely friendly.
Yeah, there's a guy at our gym named Livingston. He's probably the most dangerous human being that I know personally. He and I are about the same size, about the same weight, but we are not the same thing. So he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's done stand-up fighting. He's done a bunch of other different types of stand-up. He teaches Muay Thai. He's really good at no-gi. But when he walks into the gym, he's in khakis, nice belt. His shoes are shined up real nice. He's got a polo shirt tucked in. He looks like he could do your taxes for you. Right? He works in oil and gas, but like he's just a guy.
Right.
But you don't know what happens when you go poking your finger in the chest of Livingston McKenzie. That guy is a lion. Mm-hmm. But the thing about it is he has all of that danger under voluntary control until he needs it. And I asked him once, I said, hey,
which is the goal.
That is the goal. And I asked him once, and I was like, hey, man, what would someone have to do for you to like unleash that? And like, he couldn't really give me an answer. So I was like, okay, scenario. Let's say you're walking through a bar or a restaurant and someone gets lippy with your wife. Just starts calling her names or whatever. Maybe he's drunk or whatever. Like, what do you do? He's like, I will grab my wife by the arm and we're going to leave. And I was like, yeah, but what if he's really getting after her? Like he's getting in her face saying, you're stupid and you're this and you're that and whatever. What do you do? And I'm like chomping at the bit. And I'm like, I will grab her by the arm and I will casually walk out. We will get in the car and leave. It's like, okay, but what if he touches her? Like, what if he like smacks her on the butt on the way by? And in that exact moment, like you could tell something shifted in me and goes,
I would eat their lunch.
That person's over. That person's over with. But it wasn't like the moment someone looked at my wife, I got in their face and I was ready to throw down and get in a street fight because I'm a real man.
That spoke like a true 16-year-old.
Yeah. Spoken like a fully grown boy that can shave, right? What some people would call a man. But that's it. That's what meekness is. tremendous amount of strength on their voluntary control. The church is scared of creating strong men because they don't know how to control a strong man, but that's what they don't understand, is that they are not in charge of controlling the strong man. God is, and God's got enough power and direction to fix it.
Oh, 100%. He's got it all figured out, which is beautiful. And I don't think we tap into that as much. I know I don't when I could more, right? Let the worry take over, whatever it is. That right there, what you just heard was gold. Like, that was awesome. I was expecting something similar, but not as good. That was freaking money, dude. That was awesome. So let's I'm gonna change the tune here. This is the question I've been having to myself a lot. All right, so we know that Leah Thompson, whatever she was,
Leah Thomas
or whatever. She was doing the women's swimming, but he's a he.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna pretend that he's a girl. All right, so we know about equal opportunity. Like, we need to have that for, doesn't race, creed, or color, it doesn't matter. But like, women want to be treated equally as the same as men. I'm totally on board with that. I get it. Here's where we start getting like the double standard kind of weirdness that I've been like racking my brain out, because I'm guilty of this too. Is a girl wants to play a male sport, we'll say football, because we've kind of starting to see that, like, all right, she's an awesome soccer player, she's gonna be our punter. There are some comments, there are some concerns, but it's really not much pushback. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's not been a whole lot.
A man wants to go do a woman's sport, all hell breaks loose. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I want to, but can we see can you see this? Mm-hmm. It's okay for this because, we got to do the equal opportunity. And what Mike Ritland in his book, his new one, which is titled Unfuck America, he talks about this, is we talk about this equal opportunity, but that equal opportunity is becoming equal outcome.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not okay.
It's the difference between equality and equity.
Absolutely. So like, touch on that, because I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you should be in men's sport. I really don't think you should be. Like, I don't think you should be. You want to know why? Because I want to watch dudes pulverize each other. I don't want to see a dude pulverize a chick. It just doesn't sit well with me. But okay, cool, right? Because socially, that's what it's equal opportunity, all that good stuff. But yet a dude, and I'm totally against it. I think they should keep it separated, like based off your gender, is you go over here and all of a sudden, well, we see what we got. We got every kind of article, all these things. Let's give this prize because it's a he. All that's going on. So what's your take on all that?
So we pretend like there's a difference, but we know that there's not. And there's an easy proof for that. So let's go back to Leah Thomas. So Leah Thomas is a biological male that's pretending to be a female and going and dominating all these.
He's a he, by the way. He's a he. Just so you know.
So I'm fine using, if you wanted to change your name to Samantha, I would call you Samantha. Hey, Sammy, like whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, your name is your name. You can choose your name. I don't care if you change it on your birth certificate or not. But what I'm not going to do is play into the lie that you are now a female.
Right.
And so the interesting thing that was happening during the NCAA swim meets is Leah Thomas, a male, is competing against females. But there was another transgender that no one was really talking about. I believe that this person went to Yale. This was a female to male transgender. So this was a transgender male, which is to say they are biologically female, but they identify as a male.
Right.
So you would think that they would, as the NCAA, as the progressive NCAA, that they would have that individual compete in the men's swim meets.
Right.
Nope. They were competing against the women. So Leah Thomas, a biological male, says, I'm a female. Look how cute my hair is. They compete in the pool against women. A female that thinks they're a male and is identifying as a male is not forced to compete with the males. They were allowed to compete against the females, but they were on testosterone because they wanted to present more masculine. They wanted their hormones to be more masculine, which means lower estrogen, higher testosterone.
Yep.
So there's one proof that we don't actually believe that. Here's the other proof. So you brought up the football player. So I believe it was the women's soccer starting goalie for Vanderbilt in the SEC, I believe. They were brought over to the men's football team to be the kicker, the place kicker, right? Mm-hmm. So they were going to be kicking extra points and kicking short field goals and all that. And they made a big deal about it. ESPN loved it, which is MSNBC Sports. They loved it. Like they thought it was the best. But this is what ended up happening. The girl went out there, kicked the ball a few times, scored some extra points. First female to score in a NCAA game, Division I NCAA game, SEC game, whatever, fine. Kicked a field goal, made it. Great. That's awesome. I wonder what would have happened, though, if there had been a blocked field goal and she had recovered that ball and a defensive tackle that was on the special teams unit busted through the line, picked her up, and slammed her into the ground to prevent her from scoring.
Now he's the bad guy.
He's the worst.
Yep.
He's a misogynist. Yep. He's bigoted. He hates women.
Yep.
He needs to be suspended for that.
That's exactly how it would be turned into, probably.
Exactly.
Like that. That's
villain.
Exactly.
That person would be a villain.
That would be the agenda.
And so that's why I think it goes back to, Jordan Peterson talked about this in 12 Rules for Life. He was talking about when boys compete against girls, there's no winning for the boys. Because if a boy gets in a fight with a boy, there's a winner, there's a loser. They typically, slap, bump, hug, and they become best friends for life, right? But if a boy fights a girl and wins, he's horrible. He's a monster. He's a bully. If a boy fights a girl and loses, he's pathetic. Like, you lost to a girl. So we have this double standard that we just accept in society. But this manifests in so many different ways. And people really disagree with me on this, and I'm fine with that. But like, my boys are likely going to wrestle. My boys aren't going to be forced into particular sports, but they will have to play sports because of the value you get from playing team and individual sports. But in youth wrestling, they typically combine girls' brackets and boys' brackets so that they can have enough people for a tournament. My boys will never compete against another female because wrestling is a sport where physical dominance wins the day. So imagine me trying to teach my 9-year-old son that they are to protect women, that they are to stand up for women, that if push comes to shove, they are to sacrifice themselves physically to protect a woman, whether that's their mom, their sister, or a girl they don't even know. And yet I'm going to send them out there and say, I need you to physically dominate that girl. Put her shoulders on the mat and hold them there until the whistle blows and she cries. Again, I know high-level wrestling coaches on both sides of this issue. But for me, that's where it goes to. As a society, we instinctively know that we should protect women. But we're pretending in order to be progressive and nice that we don't need to. And it's not going to be until a blue chip McDonald's All-American high school men's basketball player goes to Duke, but not the men's team and the women's team, and averages 170 points a game and 100 rebounds and 74 blocks to where we're going to be like, we should maybe protect this. But also the physical sports, MMA, right? I'm a trans female, right? I know I have a 12-1 record as a male fighter, but now I want to go fight women in the 145-pound division.
Because that's how I identify right now.
Because that's how I identify.
Things have changed.
Where are we going to stop the lunacy?
Exactly. It's just going to keep going. That's how, I mean, you could see it in the mask. You could see it in the vaccines. You could see it in the peaceful protest. You can see it in everything. If you don't cut off, and I said this in the very beginning, if you do not cut off the head of the serpent, it is going to get so bad where it just devours us all, and we have been devoured. And
it's going to move at such a faster pace than we've ever seen. So I remember, Eddie, so 50 years ago, if you would have said, or not even 50 years ago, 25 years ago, you said, gay marriage was going to be a thing. People look at you like you're crazy. 10 years ago, if you would have looked at it like, hey, we're going to see significant portions of our adolescent population identifying as trans, right? You would have been like, that's insane. 7 years ago, if you would have said, hey, a 7-year-old is old enough to change their gender and we should do that, with hormones and all that, you would have thought people were crazy.
I instantly just went up a level in anger.
Yeah, exactly. But 2 or 3 years ago on my show, I did a show called The Overton Window. So the Overton Window is what society will allow in as conversation that is okay for society, right? So the Overton window shifts and moves. Things that are outside the window are things we can't really talk about as society. Things that are inside the window are things that are certainly okay. 100 years ago, interracial marriage would have been outside of the Overton window. Right. 30 years ago, gay marriage outside the Overton window. You get the point. But I said on my podcast, I said the next revolution or the next front in the sexual revolution is pedophilia. And the normalization of pedophilia is the next thing that we're going to see.
We're already starting to see it.
A bunch of my very sober-minded, well-meaning, my boys, my foxhole boys, right, reached out to me and said, bro, I've been with you. I know you say some extreme things. You're pretty forceful. Dude, I'm not down with that. You crossed the line. I don't see that. I think you're way out of line, blah, blah. And I said, I appreciate your pushback. Wait. I cannot wait until I get your apology. And then a few years later, there's TED Talks, TEDx Talks about people that are like, no. These, pedophilia is just like, being straight or gay or bi. It is just a sexual preference. We don't need to demonize these people.
People are okay about freaking taking a baby that's pretty much ready to be birthed and They're not going to have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's a seared consciousness thing. But then those people got a new name. We don't call them pedophiles anymore. We call them MADs, minor attracted people, right?
Is that a new thing? Because I haven't heard that yet.
That's a new thing. Look it up.
Oh, wow.
If you hate yourself, look it up.
I'm not going to look it up.
Minor attracted people.
Anything that has to do with that?
Yeah. MAPS. I think I said MADs earlier. It's MAPS, minor attracted people, minor attracted persons, right? Because we can't gender them, obviously, so we call them minor attracted persons. But here's the thing, Eddie. So this is where it comes in. Everyone in your audience, you want a hard book? Read The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman. I just had him on my show.
Read that. Say that again.
The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Trueman.
Gotcha.
That explores the foundations and the scaffolding underneath the LGBTQ sexual revolution, but specifically the T, the trans and the LGBTQ. And here's why. And this is why I made the argument back in the day, and I'm being proven right, and I hate that I'm right about this. Because Eddie, what age is your youngest kid?
7.
Okay, I'm not going to use your kid as the example, but I'm just going to say a 7-year-old. If a 7-year-old
Now I'm thinking it's my kid you're talking about.
That's fine. You can think it. I put it in your brain, but I'm going to completely absolve myself of all sin.
Carry on.
If a 7-year-old can choose their gender, why can they not choose their sexual partner?
Right.
Okay.
Or a bunch of other things.
Right. And the biological markers of chromosomes, which show us, XX, female, XY, male. Let's say that an adult, a 25-year-old, wanted to have a sexual relationship with a 7-year-old. What if that person just identifies as trans-aged? Oh, no, I know my birth certificate says I'm 25. I know my driver's license says I'm 25, but I'm actually 13. What do you say? It can
go anything. It can do any. You can do any. You can identify as anything you freaking want.
And this gets back into the conversation about Christians and conservatives that are being way too nice about this because they've bought this lie that in order to love our neighbor as ourselves, that we have to accept everything that our neighbor does, even if it is to their own sinful destruction. Because there are people out there that identify as furries. They identify as animals.
I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Would it be loving?
Actually, did we talk about that in the last podcast?
We may have, whenever you came on my show.
Because that was a new one. I'm like, what?
But if somebody walked into your studio here and they were here to have lunch with us, and they identified it as a furry, would it be loving of us to put their food on the floor?
I would put the food on the floor and I'd put them outside.
But would that be loving? I don't think it would be loving. It would be funny, but it wouldn't be loving. There are people that identify as furniture. Is it loving as a Christian to, when that person walks in, I'm serious. Is it loving to sit on that person and lounge after you've had a nice meal because they identify as a sofa? Is that where we're going?
It's spitting in their face, but hey, that's what you identify as. But it's, where does it stop?
Right.
It seems like nowhere.
It should stop with truth. And that's what we as Christians.
A long time ago.
Right. That's what we as Christians should stand up for. Because telling somebody that believes that they're the opposite sex, it is not loving to play into that, to that mental illness, to play into that ideology. The loving thing would be to say, no, you were created male. By God, he gave you your maleness as a gift. He gave you your skin pigment as a gift. He gave you your height, your eye color, your everything, where you were born. All that was a gift, and he is going to be able to use all of that to his redounding glory. But if we just say, oh, well, we're just going to make, trans ideology, we're going to add that to the pantheon of love inside of our church, and we're going to be a trans-affirming church, an LGBTQ-affirming church, because we want to love people. And, obviously the only way to love somebody is to affirm all of their opinions and ways of operating. And yet I bet those people wouldn't affirm a wife beater who in his mind thinks it's okay to do that.
Right.
I doubt that they would say, yes, that is an okay, right, and moral thing to do. They'd probably say, no, we have to draw a line somewhere. Well, I'm going to draw the line where a child's genitalia begins, which you want to chop off and throw in the trash can because progressivism or something.
And this is kind of where we're going. And Kyle is not saying that he hates gay people. He hates the act of it. Like, hate the sin, not the sinner.
Right.
Like, people are freaking awesome. We make bad decisions. Like, I can honestly say at a certain season in my life, I spent way too many days at the bar. Didn't make me a bad person, but that was bad. I should not have been doing that. It was wrong. And this is the same stuff. Like, people, all these trans LGBTQRTFPUX, all that stuff, most of them, I believe, I don't know the stats on it, but a lot of them do this. And then they realize, they see the lights, like, wait a second, I was in a very dark place, and now I don't want to be this anymore. I think Demi Lovato, just that freak.
Yeah, she's like, identifying as female again.
Now she's back to being, back to normal. So we all go through hard times. So he's not saying like off with their heads at all, but yeah, off with the heads for that act. It's not right.
Well,
it's not right.
Let's go back to your example of going to the bar. You weren't a bad person because you went to the bar. You were a bad person that went to the bar.
Right.
Okay. That's where we get to the story of the gospel. We all have to understand that we are horribly depraved, that from the moment we were born, the moment we were conceived and born into sin. We have a sin nature that can't be washed off by any amount of good deeds or amount of money that we drop into the plate that they're passing. The only thing that saves us from eternal damnation and for paying the price for our sins against a holy and just God is the blood of Christ, and putting our trust in the fact that he was sent here, that he was crucified on a Roman cross at the behest of the Jewish Sanhedrin, that he was put into a tomb, and that 3 days later he walked out of that tomb alive. He didn't just spiritually rise, he physically rose. And putting our trust in that fact is our only hope, because none of us are good. Because some people are like, well, I don't go to the bar and pick up random chicks and, get in bar fights, or I don't murder people.
We can talk about anger, domestic violence, gambling to an extent. Like we can, there's a list of them.
So everyone's got their own flavor of sin. They've got their own gumbo with their ingredients, but everything goes. Everything has the same outcome. You are either saved by the blood of the Lamb or you are not.
True.
There is no middle ground. There's no maybe. There's no I'm going to flirt with this idea, but then I still want to do some of this other stuff. You are either wholly dedicated to that idea or you are not. And people need to understand that. So when I talk about LGBTQ people, it's like, of course we don't hate these people. They need Jesus just as much as I need Jesus.
Absolutely.
Whenever I do my porn,
but we should not be catering to them.
Whenever I talk to people about porn, or here in a little bit, I'm going to be teaching my church about how to defeat pro-abortion arguments. I start every single one of those speeches and those talks with, statistically speaking, I know there is a woman in this room that has murdered their baby via abortion. I know there is a man in this room that has paid for it, that has dropped her off or picked her up. I know there are family members that supported this decision because they didn't want their buddies down at the golf club.
I talk about it in the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Do with Tristan, which is, talk about lesson.
And I say, guess what, guys? Jesus died for those sins too. There's no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus, but you have to depend on the blood of the Lamb, okay? Because otherwise, you're just a murderous, lying, adulterous sinner that has no hope unless you're covered by the blood of the Lamb. Yep. So whatever your chosen sin is, great, good for you. You still need the blood of Christ.
Absolutely. And that was, that's perfect. And that is good to say we all have our shortcomings, or we have our typical flavor that I like to say of like, hey, I need to work on this area. You know what that area is. I talk about a lot of areas in here, and that's where I want to kind of circle back. Sorry to Jen Polanski this, but bringing it back is, so in Unafraid, in our book, there's a moment where I go to this retreat, this Christian retreat, and that's where I meet Kyle. And you guys got to read the book, but it talks about how I kind of secretly wanted someone to kind of pray over me because I saw other people doing it and started them getting saved, or whatever that meant. But I could just see something was happening. I was intrigued. At the end of our little bonfire, after I said I need to get rid of this, I think anger, drinking, porn was one, and I'm very honest with this because it's the truth. And pill popping. I think there was probably about 20 more plus 50 that I wanted to stop. And then you came over and you go, may I pray for you? And after like, hey bro, that was awesome. Like, do you care if I pray for you? And that's where I kind of like lost it a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to know, and actually this is a question from Keith. He wants to know what was going on in Kyle's head. Because you were 25, 26.
Yeah.
That's young.
Yeah.
That's very young. It is, like in terms of like wisdom, experience, and all that. But you were extremely obedient. You had to hear something, and you can fill us in what that was, or if you can remember. But you were obedient to that thought, to that voice, and you came over. Because most people be like, dude, Eddie is the most intimidating looking dude in the world because he's got tattoos. He's a bigger guy, and he just doesn't really smile. That's just me.
Yeah.
Right. But we know that's not me. But you did. So. Can you walk us through that as best as you can remember?
Dude, I can remember it distinctly.
Wow.
And,
okay, cool.
And so shout out to Keith, the co-author on the book, did a fantastic job helping you get this book to us.
Yes, he did. He's amazing.
So to set the setting for everybody, I think this is the last night. So I think this was like a Thursday night through a Sunday morning camp.
It would have been Saturday night.
Yeah, Saturday night. So this is the big dramatic bonfire.
And this camp is a camp that was put on by, it's based off of Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. It's like his kind of thing.
Yeah. And so this organization that I helped found, they were basically repackaging Eldridge stuff and doing it in a camp context and all that. And so there's probably 80, 90 guys there. And, all weekend there's, we're watching videos that were by John Eldridge.
There was no alcohol, which really threw me through a
which
loop,
is odd for a lot of people, but we're eating good and, we're playing games, we're doing paintball and, some guys are just chilling, having coffee. So it's a good kind of retreat for a lot of dudes and whatever. But Saturday night is where the rubber really starts to meet the road, because a lot of guys throughout the week, they realize, oh man, I've got a father wound, or I got a mother wound, or I've done this horrific thing, or, oh man, I'm not saved. I need to depend on the blood of the Lamb, whatever. So Saturday night, guys are writing down, their old identities, and they're writing down their sins, and they're doing all those different things. And then they get up in front of everybody at the bonfire. They kind of talk through that a little bit, some short, some a little bit longer. They crumple up the paper, throw it into the fire. It's supposed to be this big dramatic thing.
Which is an awkward thing when you're saying like, hey, here's my flaws.
Yeah.
Because we as men have a pride issue.
Yeah.
And we don't want to say that to a bunch of strangers pretty much. Yeah. Like, hey, I deal with this. Things that you just don't tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And so while this is all happening, like I'm one of the leaders. And so I'm just kind of watching and I'm just kind of, paying attention, seeing what things are doing. But at some point I see you. And at this point, you and I hadn't spoken. You were just the tattooed, roided out guy. I knew you were a SEAL at that point, and knew you didn't talk much. And at that point, that's where the spell that SEALs could cast on people could be kind of mysterious. Like we just, there were guys in camp that assumed that you were dressing up in black and putting on face paint and like killing animals and bringing it back to camp and eating it and cleaning everything up before everybody woke up.
Too much work, man.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But I saw you disengage physically from the group, and then you walked away in the middle of all this happening, right? And so I'm trying not to, church this up any more than it already is. But I see you walk away, and I immediately key in on you. I'm like, that guy doesn't need to poop. Like, that's not where he's going. Like, something's happening here, and he's avoiding it. He's walking away. And so in that moment,
it's a thing called feelings.
Right. So I could acknowledge that and then not do anything about it.
Right. But
I literally felt what can only be called God or the Holy Spirit saying, go talk to him. Go talk to him. He's disengaged. Go talk to him. Something's happening. So, all right. So I walk up to you. Yeah, I'm a young guy, right? And I'm before I knew how to do jiu-jitsu and before I knew anything about shooting, before I knew anything about life, I'm barely a man. I've been married a few years and all that kind of stuff. And I walk up to you and I was just basically like, hey man, what's up? What you doing? What's out here that's not over there? Kind of a thing. And you were very dismissive. Like, you were polite, but you were very dismissive. You were kind of standoffish, kind of put me out of arms, like, oh man, I'm good. I'm just, just whatever. I'm just doing me. I'm cool. And like, I'm Eddie, whatever. And at some point, I just ask you, I'm like, well, the only logical thing for me to do now is to ask you if I can pray for you. So, hey, do you mind if I pray for you? And you just kind of, you kind of take a deep breath and you say, yeah. And I put my hand on your shoulder and I don't remember what I said, right? I just prayed what I felt in the moment. And I had no idea what that meant for you, right? Because you know what I did? I let you go on and do whatever you were going to go do. And I went back to the fire. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, I'm not going to drag this guy back to the fire. I wasn't even capable of it at the time. And so it's like, yeah, go do your thing, whatever. I don't even know if we said bye to each other the next morning when we all left.
We went and talked on the. Oh
yeah. We went and talked
for
afterwards.
For a little bit afterwards. But yeah, I remember that. I was like, because I remember when you did that, I was like, this guy's got some stones coming up here. Like, because people don't do that. They just don't do that. And you did, and I was like, man, it was like, for me, it was an answered prayer. Yeah. Because I wanted someone to pray for me because I'd never had it. I never asked for it. Yeah. Didn't even really know what it meant or what it was. But what was cool is when you were doing that is my body got very warm and chills at the same time. And it was like amazing. Little did I know what all that was, like the Holy Spirit's coming in, like your word, like it's just, and I don't remember what you said either, and it really doesn't even matter, to be honest with you. Yeah. It's just like something happened that was a defining moment, and I was like, wow. Like, it was a sandpit moment. It really was. And it was one of those things that, like, I just will not forget, that started the snowball effect to bigger and better things in my journey to get as close as possible to Jesus as I possibly can.
Well, and to take a little bit of focus off of me in that story, because it'd be very easy to be like, oh, I'm the reason Eddie's here today. Look at how cool I am. But the reality is that was a lesson for all of you listening to this. It was a lesson in obedience, because how many times have you heard the call of God only to be like, he probably wasn't talking to me. I probably just have gas. Like it's something like that. But it was also a lesson in putting your pride down, because pride would be like, man, he's just being a guy. He's just doing his own thing. Like he needs to do his own thing. So it's a lesson in obedience. It's a lesson in kind of like getting over yourself and just saying, hey, I'm going to go do this. But it's also a lesson in just being prepared, because you have no idea what you're walking into, right? So in a good example I use, like whenever I go out to eat at restaurants, like, when the server brings you your food and then they ask you like, hey, is there anything else I can get you for you all? I'm like, hey, we're about to bless our meal. Is there anything I can pray for you about? You have no idea what's going to come
powerful.
next.
We talked about the last
we
podcast.
talked about
I'm like, that is nice.
But it's like, I've never had somebody blast me in the face after that. I've never had somebody like, tip my soup into my lap. I've never had any of that happen. It's somewhere between, no, man, I'm good. Thanks, though, to, oh, man, gosh, no one's ever asked me that. And my grandma's, she's really sick. And she like basically raised me and I have no idea what to do. Or, dude, I'm only working this job because I got fired from my other job. And like so
we never know what's going on.
It's rough right now.
Yep.
Just pray that I can make my bills, or, what. And you're able to love on somebody in a way, and you're able to basically pastor someone almost. You're able to like really minister them in that moment. And what did you do? You ask that awkward question that's going to put butterflies in your stomach and you don't think you're going to be able to say it. It's like, hey, we're about to bless our meal. Is there anything I can pray for you about? Hey, we're about to bless our meal. Is there anything that we can pray for you about? Hey, I'm about to bless this meal. Is there anything that you're going through that you want us to make sure we lift up?
Mm-hmm. And right now, people that are listening to this, like, I just can't do that. I don't have courage. What would you say to them?
I mean, at the risk of sounding like a bad 80s shoe commercial, just do it. Like, I mean, at some point, that is what obedience is required of you.
That is growth.
Yeah.
Getting outside. If you imagine a circle, all right, you're in the middle of this circle, all right? Out here is where the magic happens. Get out of your freaking circle. Get out of your box. Try new things. Like that's how you grow. That's how you lead. That's how you get better. It is like everything that we've been kind of saying is you have to get out of that. And I don't do that. I want to start doing that.
Well, the first time you do it, we're about to go to lunch after this. So
I'm going to do it.
I'll leave it up to you.
I got this one. See,
you do it once, and it's going to be really, really weird, and then you're not going to die, and then the next time you do it, it's going to become old hat, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and then you do it in front of your wife and your kids, and they weren't expecting you to do it,
and they see it.
You didn't, and they're like, and you don't have to have a big conversation about it afterwards. You go, you see, kids, that's how Dad's a good Christian, but they see that and they're like, oh. And like you see things that are modeled. Like I remember when my family was eating dinner when I was a kid, like at Golden Corral, and this woman, like her knee locked up as she was walking back to her table and she fell flat on her face. And I swear to God, before her broccoli finished rolling around on the floor, my dad was up out of his seat and he had ran over there and he was picking her up, making sure that she was okay. Now his dad died when he was 13 years old. He was killed by a drunk driver, right? So he wasn't taught that. Somebody in his life modeled chivalry and protection of women and caring for them and all that, so much so that he darted out of his seat to basically help this woman, right? Now, he didn't get that from a biblical ethic because my dad is not a Bible reader and he wasn't at the time and still isn't. But like it was modeled for him. So you do that in front of your family, you're modeling that. You do that in front of your wife, you're saying, hey, I know that was maybe awkward, but like this is what God would want me to do in this situation. And look what we were able to do to minister to that person. Because that could lead to other conversations. Hey, this is where we go to church. You should come. Here's my number. Mm-hmm. Like maybe you're financially well off where you could leave a sizable tip for somebody that is struggling financially. And you're leaving that without so much as giving them your name and your card so that they can thank you later. You're leaving it and then you're going away later. Because that's the thing about obedience is that moment at that camp, Eddie, could have been the last moment that I ever spoke to you. Mm-hmm. We could have not stayed connected. We could have not gotten each other's numbers. I could have not found this book later in life, like all that. But guess what? you still would have gotten the benefit from my obedience to God in that moment. So guys, you're not always going to know where the story ends. You're not always going to know the impact. You may just be tossing a rock in someone's shoe, like Greg Kokel says. You're just making that small little shift in someone's life that could blossom into something crazy later.
And you don't need the notoriety of it. You just need to do it, because that's what we're called to do, is to just do the right thing and blessing other people and helping other people. And that is the key to life, in my opinion.
Sure.
Is help other people, is be that, as you would say, this age. So
absolutely.
You talked about obedience, about when we did that conversation as obedient. You said it about 5 times. And this right here is a copy of Unafraid, and this is for you.
Thanks, sir.
And if you want to read the dedication inside, you're more than welcome. If you don't, but there is one word in there. It starts with an O and ends in obedient.
Yeah,
you kept saying that. I was like, and I that's exactly what I wrote in there, because you were extremely, and I appreciate that for you, because that helped me grow.
Well, man, that's one thing, like, as I read your book, because, you know, the difference in terms of how I do my interviews on my show is, like, you know, I will read every word of someone's book, and, like, I try to squeeze stuff out that the publisher didn't even notice, or that maybe you didn't even notice as you were writing it. And as you're going through a book like this, like, you can develop a lot of opinions, and you can look at things in a lot of different ways, and you could come across with a bunch of different opinions of who Eddie Penny is and, you know, the life he's leading and all that. And you're going to maybe quibble with some of the decisions that you've made and some of your theological points and all that. But what you see in these pages is an imperfect man that is striving towards the perfection of Christ. And that's how you become Christ-like, is whenever you look at the perfect model of manhood, which is the life of Jesus Christ, and you try to glean from the scriptures the lessons, and you apply that to your life and how you do that. And you will always do that inappropriately. You will, well, not always, you will sometimes miss the mark. You will sometimes fall into sin, and that's just the way that it is. But it's about having an unafraid mindset. It's about being undaunted in the face of those things and moving in that direction. That's why we spend so much time on Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast, talking about that very thing. So guys, if you haven't read the book, like, you obviously need to get out there and read it, but read it not from I'm going to read a story about a guy that was in development group and all that. It's a story about an imperfect man that is striving for perfection that he knows he will never attain, but he still sees the path as worth it.
Yep. Absolutely, man. And this also one of our Unafraid coins, my friend. Get down here. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Everything.
Awesome.
There's only 2 ways to get that. Freaking feed Unafraid and be an asset, or you can go spend $1,000 on our website and buy it. So I don't think anyone's going to go buy a coin.
Yeah, you can buy it or you can
earn it. Unless you want to, it's up to you.
Right.
So seriously, man, I appreciate it. Is there any, like, if your key takeaways, anything that you want to put out that we didn't put out that you'd like to share? Floor is yours.
Yeah, the big thing is I'm just so thankful for you. I'm thankful for this friendship, because we laugh about it. This is the second time we've ever been in the same room together, and we've been friends for over a decade, right?
Still in contact.
Right, we're still in contact. So I really appreciate your friendship. I appreciate being able to kind of see how you've grown and developed.
Likewise.
So I'm so thankful for that. Guys, if you want to listen to our show or find us, you search Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast, anywhere. We're on all the socials in the same places. And so we're releasing about 3 episodes a week right now, 2 interviews and 1 solo episode.
I know you send me some all the time. I didn't know you were doing that much. His stuff's good. It is the no sugarcoat, no fluff. It is true. It is good stuff. Like, it is. It is really good.
I mean, the interviews are everyone from, I just had a guy on that's like big in the libertarian anti-war space. And then I'll have, I'll have you, and I'll have Tim Kennedy on, but then I have like a Christian magician. I have Phil Robertson.
Lead singer on as well.
Yeah. Like John Cooper. Like, I have all these people from all these different walks of life, and I try to get stuff out of them that they don't talk about in other interviews. Like I just interviewed Pete Roberts, the founder of Origin, and he runs Jocko Fuel and all that. And he said something on the podcast. He even said, he's like, dude, I've never said that before. It was just because of how the podcast went. But we'd love y'all's support. We're very, very unashamed about asking for this. We're unafraid. We're undaunted about asking for this, but we're basically listener supported. So we get a little bit of money from advertisements, but the way that we're able to keep the lights on and keep producing the content that is having this impact on men is because we have monthly donors. We have guys that go to Undaunted.Life. That's our website, Undaunted.Life/donate. And we have dudes hopping on as monthly donors, everything from, $5 a month to $500 a month. And every bit of that is going to buy equipment, to do editing, to move into other areas. And I mean, my goodness, what we've got in store for 2023 is awesome, but all that costs money, guys. And I know people get a little bit weird when people ask for money, but like, that's the thing, is like, that's what we do. We don't put anything behind a paywall right now, and we don't sell enough hats to be able to keep the lights on. So that's the deal, is we would love to have you guys. By the way,
his hats are freaking awesome. He's got some
Look at those
awesome
things.
shirts, man. They're like, this is one of my number ones right here, man.
Branded bills, guys. But yeah,
it.
dude, I just appreciate the time. I appreciate you allowing me to speak to your audience, and we'd love to have y'all come over to check out our show as well.
No, I got, as I'm sitting here just listening to you, I'm getting filled So I can't imagine what everyone else is in. They got to be in the same thing. So I appreciate you sharing, being open, being honest, giving us your point of view. And that was gold, man. It was gold.
Man.
It was gold.
My man.
So thank you. So that was Unafraid again. Where can they find you?
So we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you get podcasts, YouTube, just search Undaunted.Life,
and
a man's
Instagram,
podcast.
You've got Undaunted.Life, right?
At Undaunted.Life, Facebook.com/Undaunted.Life. We don't really do anything anywhere else other than Facebook or Instagram.
So make sure you're following those guys because they put out some great stuff. Like it'll get you thinking. And you can just tell that he knows his stuff because he's very smart. So way smarter than I am. So that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 13. If you guys haven't picked up a copy of Unafraid, please do so. And check out the Unafraid shop. All right, we're out. See ya.